Hello and welcome to another episode of Chuchu is a Ranker. On today's episode we're going to be talking about Alex Garland. Now Alex Garland has had an interesting career progression. He started as a novelist with his novel The Beach garnering some critical acclaim. That novel was then turned into a movie by Danny Boyle. This kicked off a partnership between the two, with Danny Boyle directing movies and Alex Garland writing the screenplays and stories for them. This resulted in 28 Days Later and Sunshine. Since then, Alex Garland has branched out to become a writer, producer and director of movies, and has even had a crack at video games. He wrote the video game Enslaved: Odyssey to the West and was also a story supervisor on Devil May Cry. Strange as it may seem, but Alex Garland has become a bastion of high-minded science fiction in our current day of age. So, without further ado, let's be complete rankers and rank up a storm. Here are Alex Garland's movies ranked from worst to best. Never Let Me Go is an adaptation of the popular novel by Kazuo Ishiguro. Alex Garland served as the screenwriter on the film. Now, we're kicking off with a pretty bad one because I just don't like Never Let Me Go. It's a pretty turgid movie, to be honest. Good things first, the film absolutely looks gorgeous. The cinematography is on point. So visually, there's nothing to complain about. However, the screenwriting is a total mess, which actually falls directly on the shoulders of Alex Garland, so a bit of a slap on the wrist for that, Alex. There's a basic setup, which there are a group of clones who are being raised to be organ donors later in life. But that setup is followed through without any deviation, because these characters are designed to grow up and then donate their organs and then basically die, and then that's exactly what happens in the film. There's no deviation. As I said, there's just nothing actually happens in the film. They just go through their depressing life and then end in exactly the same way that the movie set up at the beginning. There are no twists whatsoever, and there are no character arcs either. The characters just don't change in this movie. They start out as one person, and the movie tracks the characters through their life. So they start out young and gradually grow into their mid-20s, where eventually they die. But yeah, they start the movie as one character, and they grow up and nothing happens to them, and they end the movie as exactly the same character that they began. So it's weird. There's just no point to the movie. And although they are sheltered from the outside world, eventually they do get to experience the outside world, and you'd think that this would initiate some kind of fight for them, that they would rebel against their fate. But no, there's no fighting. They just accept their fate, and because they don't fight, you can't really give them much sympathy, because they have no backbone, they have no spine. So you just basically get this depressing slog of a movie that has no surprises, that does exactly what it says it's going to do at the start. This is just a depressing trawl, and I can't recommend this one. Directed by Danny Boyle, The Beach is an adaptation of Alex Garland's breakout novel. The concept of the movie and the book are actually really cool. It's about a traveller who ends up getting a secret map from a crazy dude that leads him to an unspoiled island off the coast of Thailand where tourists have yet to lay claim. And on that island there's a commune of other tourists living together and creating their own kind of society. So it's a pretty interesting concept, but it's just the execution of it is definitely not perfect. So I have to say, I really hate the cinematography in this film, which is a crying shame, because it's a movie called The Beach, taking place in Thailand, and you'd think that it would have lots of kind of travel porn, lots of local colour, and beautiful shots of the beaches, and really make you want to go travel. But there's this weird visual filter on it where it doesn't quite seem like reality, and maybe that's partially because in the movie the characters are taking lots of drugs and stuff, so maybe it's a purposeful choice, but it definitely takes away from the travelogue aspect of it. It's not quite as colourful or as visually enticing as you'd want it to be. It's actually quite murky. Also, structurally, there are a lot of problems with the film. It's all over the place, especially when it comes to time scale. it's very difficult to tell how long those people are actually in that situation. Is it a week? Is it a month? Is it a year? You just can't tell how long those characters, are on that island. And again, maybe that's a purposeful choice. Maybe, time is just a construct of your own imagination, etc. And there are some character motivations that don't quite make sense, and the whole sort of climactic aspect feels very forced and rushed, and it doesn't entirely make sense. But still, there are some good things about the film. There are some interesting scenes and some interesting acting choices, and some shocking moments, so it's not terrible. And it also gets kudos for the jump and run video game scene. But that's a lot of fun. "28 Days Later" is the second collaboration between Alex Garland and Danny Boyle. It's a zombie film, and it starts off really excellent actually, with some wonderful shots of Cillian Murphy, who wakes up after the initial zombie outbreak in a hospital and basically just has to wander through the empty streets of London. The photography there is awesome, and it must have been so difficult to close down central London to get those shots. It's pretty impressive. It has a very likeable lead actor in Cillian Murphy, who gives a pretty great performance, and also has likeable additions too, with Naomi Harris and Brendan Gleeson coming into the plotline. But there are problems with the movie. Most notably, it really falls apart in the final third. The first two thirds, though, are really great. It's scary and intense, and it has a great pace, and the characters are likable enough that you actually want to see them, succeed and get out of danger. But again, the final third, where they're transported onto an army base, it just doesn't quite work. The characters on the army base aren't likable, and they're not supposed to be likable because ultimately they are kind of self-serving bad guys, but just the acting performances from the soldiers on the army base, too cartoonish in comparison to what came before. It feels like we were in a serious zombie movie, and in the final third we're in some kind of cartoon version of one. The action scenes in the final third are also quite clumsily directed, and they just don't convey a sense of excitement. So 2/3 of a good movie, but that final third, that's pretty tough going in my opinion, and that's why this one kind of racks him low on the list. Annihilation represents a giant step up in quality on this list. The plot of Annihilation concerns a team of all-women scientists sent into a scientific anomaly called the Shimmer, which is just basically this huge bubble that's forever expanding. Of course, teams have been sent in before, but they've lost contacts with those teams and they've disappeared without a trace. When it gets rolling, the film is actually really intense and exciting, and pretty scary at times. It also has some cool creature design. Some of the animals that live within the Shimmer are really weird and unique. I love the way that this film doesn't explain anything to you within the Shimmer either. There are things in this universe that we, can't understand, and the characters don't understand, and it doesn't really try to explain that to you, it just lets it be, lets it breathe. And likewise with the more kind of metaphorical themes of the film, it's left to you to decide what those are, and I enjoy that. It plays to my intellect. Not that I'm saying I'm a particularly intellectual person, I'm just saying, yeah. some pretty good effects, not quite top level effects, but the effects are really good enough. But it features many unforgettable scenes and also has great performances from Natalie Portman and Holly Hunter. So yeah, just an all-round fantastic science fiction action adventure film. Highly recommended. Written and directed by Alex Garland, Ex Machina is an absolute masterpiece and one of the most cleverly written science fiction films of all time. Its musings on AI and what is consciousness are absolute top draw stuff, just absolutely fascinating. Technically, on a credits level, Ex Machina is Alex Garland's debut effort, although we all know that he actually did direct Dredd. More on that later. But what is really surprising is his level of confidence with this movie. He has almost like a Kubrick-style eye for static imagery, and this is complemented by the clean design of the sets and things. Everything has a beautiful sense of minimalism, which really works for the style and theme of the movie. Likewise, the cast is minimalist, with only a few actors on board, but each one of them plays their role to absolute perfection. You have stunning performances from Domhnall Gleeson, Oscar Isaac and Alicia Vikander. The movie is taut, intense, intellectually stimulating and scary as hell at points. So yeah, it's an absolute masterpiece. If you haven't seen it, just drop everything, go watch it. You won't regret it. Directed by Danny Boyle and written by Alex Garland, Sunshine is just an awesome science fiction adventure film. Now, on a technical level, I have to throw up my hands and say Ex Machina is probably the better film. I think it's certainly the one that's going to be remembered as a masterpiece over this one. However, on a personal level, I just really, really love Sunshine. I mean, it's so cool. The sun is dying, and a group of scientists set off on a last-ditch mission to reignite the sun with a giant nuclear weapon. How cool is that? Of course, things go badly wrong, as they always do in this type of movie, and what starts off as a more sort of science-based adventure slowly devolves into horror. And that's actually the weakest part of the film, because towards the end of the movie, there's a bad guy who comes into the picture, and he's not really necessary because the crew dynamics were working so well. There had been an accident aboard the ship, and the ship was running out of oxygen and running out of supplies and what have you. So it led to the whole kind of like man versus mission aspect. They could make it if they lose certain crew members, but that would probably involve having to kill certain crew members. It's all about the kind of like the moral aspects of that, and there's a lot of really fascinating character choices and moments in the movie. So they didn't really need to go all out horror. However, that's what they did, and it's still an incredibly satisfying movie, with a lot of references to like things like Alien and stuff. The art design in the movie is just absolutely spectacular. The ship itself is one of the best ships I think ever put to tape. It's just an absolutely amazing construction. The effects are just top drawer, and there's a lot of excitement and a lot of visually stunning scenes. And the film is just really memorable start to finish, and just fantastic, high-minded, wonderful science fiction adventure. Highly recommended. I really love this one. It's fantastic. Dread was Alex Garland's directorial debut, although he wasn't credited. The credited director was Peter Travis. The reason for this is that it was initially Garland's baby. He got the film put into production and was involved in all aspects of its design and production. During the filming of the movie, Travis and Garland had severe disagreements about Travis's footage. This went up the chain of command to the company, and the company came down on Garland's side, and Garland kind of took over from there. So much so that in the editing process, the original director Peter Travis was shut out of the editing room, and Garland took over wholesale. Not wanting to smear the director, Peter Travis was left with the directorial credit, but it was in actual fact Alex Garland. The film is just absolutely astonishing. Dread is an absolute masterpiece and one of my favourite films of all time. It's just a rip-roaring, thunderous action movie, start to finish. I absolutely love it. Just the moment it kicks in with that whoom whoom, that thrumming bass. It just takes off like a roller coaster and doesn't stop, doesn't relent until the end credits roll. The story is really scaled down and really simple. Basically, Dread gets trapped in a building and has to defy the odds, fight his way up to the top floor and kill the bad guy. That's it. That's basically the plot line. But it's just so thrilling. It's just such a pure throwback to 1980s action movies like RoboCop and Terminator, but bolstered by modern day effects. The film is centered by a really stunning performance by Karl Urban. It's unique in that he never ever takes off his helmet during the movie, so you never get to see his eyes, or indeed his face. I mean, if you didn't know the voice of Karl Urban, you'd probably struggle to even guess who it was. But he manages to get so much subtle emotion from the character. It's a really dynamic, excellent excellent performance. Lena Headey of Game of Thrones fan also gives a great performance as the psychotic bad guy, Mama. So yeah, Dredd is a masterpiece of swaggering simplicity and effortless cool. If you haven't seen Dredd just yet, go out of your way to see it. It's absolutely phenomenal. I adore this movie with every sinew of my body. It's brilliant, and Alex Garland's best movie in my opinion. So there we have it. We've come to the end of this particular episode. Sound off in the comments section and let me know what your favourite Alex Garland movie is. Like and subscribe and all that jazz, but most importantly of all, just keep on ranking.